All right. Welcome to the Domestic Draft Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here
Man.
with Dan Slowick. Dan, I see you're sipping on something. What are you drinking today?
Yeah, I have a brewery up in North County, and if you've been listening, I've been featuring a lot of breweries up in North County lately. Been spending time up there too. But the brewery I have today, it's called Double Peak Brewing Company. My wife and I were just up there. We're checking out our old wedding venue and kind of just going down memory lane, showing Claire some of the places up there. Decided to look up, as I usually do, if there's a brewery in the area, and this one, Double Peak Brewing Company, was there. Walked in, tasted a couple, and ended up getting their Pilsner. It's called their Day Hike. And if you look at their can and kind of their whole brand is very outdoorsy. So I'll talk about the brewery a little bit, and then the beer. So the brewery isn't too old. I'm not sure exactly what date it opened. I think it was like 2017. But the co-founder, his name is what do I have his name in here? Frank Harton, and he's been home brewing for 25 years. And he decided, after summiting a mountain with his friend, who was a home brewer at the time years ago, had some of his beer and kind of wanted to get into it, started home brewing, got to the point where the materials and the things that he had set up could not fit in his house anymore. So he started just buying more stuff and looked for a place to brew. And just kind of turned it in from a hobby into a passion into a career and opened up Double Peak Brewing. Double Peak is an homage to the Double Peak Mountain hike trail over there in the San Alejo area where this brewery is located. They have a few beers that they predominantly have on their rotating draft list. This Pilsner is really, really good. I really enjoy it. It's got 3.6 on Untapped. It's just nice and smooth, and it's full body. It doesn't feel like you're tasting like a watered down Pilsner or anything. I really like it. I thought the brewery was cool. It had good vibes, like very outdoorsy. The guy's an older brewer, and I'm pretty sure when I was in there, I saw him, and he was still, busting his ass working while people were enjoying all of his beer. So it's definitely a passion for him. So if you're ever in, North County, San Diego, go ahead and check out Double Peak Brewing Company. What about you, man? What are you drinking?
That's cool. Yeah, I got a similar story here. So the brewery I'm doing today is called Microphone Brewing. It's based out of Elk Grove Village. Kind of see the can there. But the beer I got here is called Nature's Candy. It's a fruited sour. It's a peach Berliner Weisse. I just looked that up, the pronunciation of that. I've always thought it was Weiss, but
Or
it's the
Weiss.
German word Weiss.
Yeah.
It's 5.25%. It gets a 3.97 on a tap. So a pretty good score. For me, it's a little bit too sour. But if you like sour beers, you might like this one. Microphone Brewing is a family-owned small craft brewery. They, started from home brewing, a passion for home brewing. Mike and his wife, Lisa Palin, started the concept of a brewery inspired by music out of their basement. And then in 2015, brewed and released their first commercial beer as Microphone Brewing. In that same year, they were awarded Best New Brewery in Illinois by Rate Beer, as well as one of the best new breweries in the world by Beer Advocate magazine. So, a pretty hot start in 2015.
Yeah.
But I thought it was pretty interesting. We got two home brewer, breweries.
Yeah.
And I thought we'd bring on another home brewer and a Cubs fan and a beer connoisseur. Evan Altman has been on the show before. He's the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Cubs Insider. You can find him on Twitter at @DEvanAltman. And Evan, thanks so much for hopping back on with us to talk some Cubs.
Yeah, no problem, guys. I had to crack open a beer of my own, to kind of feel like I was part of it. So we've got some
what are we drinking?
Right here, we got some Alien Church from Tired Hands Brewing in
Wow, it's a hell of a
Ardmore,
can.
Pennsylvania. Yeah, I don't know much about it, and unlike most of these, unless I missed it, I had to look it up because most of them list the ABV on there. I was looking for something a little bit bigger because I was only going to have one. So I'm like, typically, if I'm going to have multiple, I try to stay 8.5 and under.
Sure.
Sadly, this is only a 7. I had a 9.6 that I turned down, but this has a 4.2 rating, 4.21 out of 60,000 ratings on Untapped. So
damn,
that's a real good score. Yeah,
that's a really good one. I was gonna go with an Unwind Your Mind from Hot Butcher out of Chicago, which is probably my favorite overall brewery right now. I've got one of those left. I had Only Interested in Bangers, and then I had some Single Grind, all of which are like 4.1 to 4.2, which I think is low. I love their stuff. I'm a huge hazy fan, so like if you could see it, this is the
that's looking good.
Good color,
you're not seeing through in this. Like I found this Cubs glass at a like a thrift store around here somewhere, and this thing is like not only vintage, but like today, if you buy a glass today, right? Like, and
It's
you
thin.
look at it wrong, it's
Yeah.
probably gonna break.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Exactly. Put it in
This
your
thing,
dishwasher, it's gonna
yeah.
crack.
Oh yeah, no, it's gone, right? If it goes from too hot to too cold, or again, you put it in there, you put a plate next to it in the drying rack, and it slips. But this thing is a beast. It's legit, so perfect for a 16-ounce beer, and like in a wide. Here's what I love, right? Wide base, narrow top, so you can set it down. You're not going to knock it over. It is perfect. So yeah, I appreciate it giving me a good reason to drink on a Tuesday, and probably end up with a hangover, because if I only have one, it's the worst thing in the world, right? I get a
Yeah.
terrible headache, but so I'll blame you guys tomorrow.
Yeah. It looks like a good beer. Evan, just to touch on microphone, I saw them on the store counter here. So they're out. I know they're
really?
local, like Elk Grove, right? And they're all the way. I see them out here in California now. So they're doing big things out of the Midwest. What's not doing a big thing out of the Midwest is the Chicago sports. I don't know if you've been like seeing some of the funny memes of just all the sports teams have just been so bad the last year. And we're going to focus on one of them, a disappointing Chicago sports team, Chicago Cubs, man. I think we all had high hopes, at least like playoff aspirations as fans at the beginning of the season. And that, we started off pretty good. I think we're above 500, close to 10 games above 500 right in the beginning of the season. And it kind of, we had a hell of a June in the worst way possible. Our bullpen has been depleted. So what's going on with the Cubs going into the deadline here? Are they going to be selling? Are they going to be buying? What's your analysis so far in the season?
I mean, it's hard to look at it at this point, right? There with a win on Tuesday. There's 6 games under 500. The only way they make it to All-Star break at 500 is if they win out in the first half, right? Technically, first half, we're already past the midway point. It's really hard though to look at this team the way they played. The last going 6-7 weeks now, right? Like, we're not talking about a small sample.
Yeah.
It's not like they went on a skid for a week. It's not as if, when you've got multiple, like, look at the rotation on paper. If you just saw the rotation, you'd be like, oh, damn, the Cubs are having a great season. And then you're like, oh, no. In fact, they're in last place in the division, well out of the wild card. And that's the thing that really gets it for me, is that, like I said, the expectations were driven in part by the fact that the National League on the whole is mediocre. There's like 2 or 3 good teams, a couple of decent teams, and then, like 2 bad teams, and just a bunch of teams that are meh. And you should be able, without much effort, to produce a winning record. They have not. And to be buried behind that many teams, it would be one thing to be, hey, we're a little below 500, but hey, we're 2 games out of the wild card or something like that. But when you're 5 games out of that, the way this team is constructed is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I think the only way to really do it is to choose a lane, and you either buy big at the deadline or you've got to sell. And I seriously doubt they're going to be in a position to buy big.
Yeah. And Dan touched on it kind of. There was somewhat of an irrational thought at the beginning of the season that the Cubs this year were going to be a playoff team and they're going to make this push. And I think it was, from my perspective, my opinion is that we picked up Craig Counsell. This was like go time now. Now we've got one of the best managers, if not the best manager on paper, right? They brought back a lot of those guys that were successful last year. When we got Cody Bellinger, everyone thought, okay, maybe we could take the Central, and it just hasn't happened. And I feel like I haven't seen Counsell's impact at all. And I'm wondering if we're halfway through the season. What do you think so far of Craig Counsell? Do you have any opinion on him? Have we not seen enough of him yet? Has he not really been given an opportunity because he doesn't have any talent on his roster? What is your thoughts on Counsell's performance so far?
Yeah, I look at it a couple different ways, right? It is disappointing what we've seen so far. However, one of the big things that you saw watching him from a distance in Milwaukee was the way he seemed to manage a pitching staff really well. Yeah. And then what we saw was Adbert Alzolay lay an egg when he was healthy. Then he's hurt and he's out. Prior to him being hurt, Julian Merriweather, who's expected to be the 8th inning guy, he gets hurt. He's been out most of that whole time. There's been this rash of injuries from all these guys. Yeah. And so
Yancy Almonte too.
Yeah, Monty's out, and I mean Jose Cuas had problems, even and then he ends up getting hurt. You've had Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown go out. I think of their top 7 starters, at least 5 of them now have spent time on the. Justin Steele goes out in the 2 innings into the first game of the season.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I think the one thing that he was supposed to do is really help to solidify some of that stuff. Now, that said, the Cubs did not go out and spend it, even though Jed Hoyer acknowledged it and talked about buying certainty for that bullpen. They didn't do it, other than Hector Neris, who has not been anything close to a certainty, right? And so, and you look at then, did anybody expect? I don't think anybody expected Cody Bellinger to be a superstar, but he's fallen off. Dansby Swanson has been downright terrible. They've had a black hole at catcher. So there's a few things that have happened that it's like, okay, if the Cubs could produce anywhere close to not even league average production from the catching spot, not even league average or just at league average from Dansby Swanson, and if you have Cody Bellinger doing what he did last year, it's a very different story. But none of those guys, right? There's like 2 guys on offense who have really, and say Suzuki's coming along. So it's just they haven't even performed at close to the level that you felt was reasonable. In fact, it's been worlds worse. And so I think you look at him, he's like, I don't think any manager comes in there and pulls the levers like, if David Ross is still there,
Right.
is Miguel Amaya a serviceable hitter? Like, no, that's not going to change it. So the jury's still out for sure. And I think Council's done okay, given what he's had to deal with. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just listing the names and the injuries, it's a lot. And you mentioned prior, like they just have to pick a lane. And I think that's what fans want too. We want to kind of see that, like, what's going to happen with this roster. Evan and I talk, like, is anybody on this team untouchable, or is everybody available? What lane are they going to pick? I don't see this as a team that we build and add to because of how we started and how we are performing currently. I talk about the need of a superstar. You need a big superstar on a team. This team pays like they have a superstar, but they don't have a superstar, in my opinion, on this team. What lane do you think they're picking, and how do they go about? It's a huge question. It's a loaded question. So, like, what lane do they choose, and like, how do you go about reassessing your talent on this roster and building for a championship?
Yeah, see, that's the problem, because like Jed Hoyer strikes me as the little old lady, driving in the middle lane of the interstate at 5 miles an hour below the speed limit. Right? Like, everybody's driving around him on one side or the other. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, and I wrote about this earlier, and it's a little bit ironic, or according to Alanis Morissette, or maybe it's just coincidental that they just got done playing the Phillies, a team who said, we're tired of languishing in here. We're a big money market. We're going to go out and we're going to sign a massive deal with Bryce Harper, and then we're going to continue to add 9-figure deals onto that. Yeah. We're going to buy our way into contention and trade some young guys, and then give the other young guys who come up plenty of stars around them to go ahead and come up and survive within that. Now the Cubs are playing the Orioles, a team who sucked out loud for several years in a row, kept acquiring top draft, which really the Cubs did 12 and 13 years ago, right? It's kind of the same model they followed.
Right.
The Orioles leaned even more heavily into it for longer, right? But now they've got just a ton of studs. Gunnar Henderson, top WAR player.
Awesome. It's my fantasy team.
Yeah, and then you've got, I mean, they are so good that they can have the number 1 prospect in baseball, have him come up, struggle a little bit early, and say, yeah, you know what, go on back down. We're cool. We'll still have the best record in the American League. And by the way, Jackson Holliday, if you figure it back out, now you can come back up and serve on this team with Heston Kjerstad and all these other. I mean, we could look at all that. So anyway,
yeah,
which is to say, like, but the Cubs aren't in a position to where they can just promote 4 or 5 guys next year. I mean, maybe they could, but I doubt they do. Nor are they in a position to trade enough dudes to get 2 or 3 superstars like what they've had in the past. And the troublesome part is the free agent market only has Juan Soto. And if you believe the Cubs are going to be able to land Juan Soto in free agency, I've got a bridge in the middle of nowhere that I'd be more than happy to sell to you, because I don't see it happen. So I don't think
So it's a rebuild.
I'm copping
It
out.
sounds.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think they're going to stay in the middle. I think they're going to move guys like Christopher Morel, possibly even Nico Horner, because they've got Matt Shaw and James Triantos coming up.
Yeah.
I think if they could find somebody to take Bellinger, who's got a poison pill of 2 player options in his contract, which is just a terrible deal, I think, for being able to move. They have Owen Casey coming up, Kevin Alcantara, guys like that. I think they're going to move veterans to free up space. The marquee deal is not a good one for them from a TV perspective. The revenue is not as good as what they want. I think they're going to continue to stay budget conscious and really hope that like 2 or 3 of these prospects hit in a huge way, because I just don't see them acquiring a superstar other than internally.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they're 10.5 back. They're in last place. I don't think there's any chance that they're going to be buyers at this point. People are getting a little bit hyped up again because they've been 5-5 in their last 10, and this team's just not there. I mean, they beat the Orioles tonight. That's always good to see, but I don't think they're anywhere close to being contenders at all, especially by the time the deadline rolls around in a couple weeks. They'd have to go on a significant run, like you said. So you think their best trade pieces then are Morel and Horner?
Probably. I mean, as far as
There's no bullpen arms,
right?
They wish
They're
they had any, so you can't sell any of
anybody.
those guys.
Right. I mean,
That's on the
Jameson
roster,
Taillon,
major league roster. Yeah.
Yeah, like Jameson Taillon, could you get him somewhere? But like again, the value is just kind of, you're not getting anything big in return for that, unless there's multiple pieces. Like you could move Justin Steele, but why the hell would you do that? Because he's one of your few guys who's still controllable and who can be ideally more of a number 2 or 3 moving down the road. You're not moving Imanaga because he's cheap and an all-star. Suzuki and Happ have no trade clauses. You could buy them out of that, but again, what kind of return are you getting? Because you're super limited in who you could actually move them to that they would waive that for. Bellinger's not getting anything back. So really, Horner with a few more years of control, Morel, who is positionless, and I think they finally, this is something that I said from the start that I didn't believe they really thought he could handle third, and he's proven me right on that front. Unfortunately, even more than he's been worse than I expected, which is really saying something. But he at least has the tools with the power, right? You don't find power like that at that cheap, controllable rate. But where are they going to play him? If they can put Shaw or Triantos or somebody else in there who can at least somewhat capably handle a defensive position, I think that's something they have to consider. But there again, the tough part is you move Morel. What do you get? He brings back a mid-level prospect, and it is not like you're shedding any salary either, right? I think he's somebody who might have to be thrown in with one of those aforementioned guys, Bellinger or whatever, to kind of help sweeten that, to kind of take the sting out of those player options. So honestly, any trades they make are probably going to be more about clearing roster space, clearing some future salary so that they can get a 40-man spot open for one of those young guys like Owen Casey or somebody else to come up and kind of start their MLB career here late in the season.
So who do you okay, so that's your Jed Hoyer. Who's it going to be? Who are you going to sell, and who are you promoting? How are you going to sell this to the fans? Because we're looking for answers. We're watching this product on the screen and it kind of looks lifeless. I mean, I know you're still watching every game, but for me, it's like I'll see it on in the background now. That's kind of where I'm at with this team. How do you go ahead and sell off a couple, add a couple, call up a couple prospects? Who are the names that we're going to see? I know you just mentioned, Nico Morel, but maybe some of the prospects that might come up. We got PCA already on the major league roster who, to me, he can't hit. And I'm like, if a team wants to take him as well, if he's got value, I'm okay shopping him. But it's just frustrating. Like, who's coming up? What are some of the answers? If you're Jed Hoyer, what are you doing with this team to sell to the fan base that, hey, we're going in the right direction and this is going to be a successful ball club? Because it's been a couple of years since we've been to the playoffs. This is not the standard that we're demanding that we should have as a big market team.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough part is that nothing they do probably within the next month or so, and who knows? The other thing is you got the draft coming up in between, right? So that might be one of their bigger acquisitions if they're able to, because there's a couple teams that should technically be picking above them that for various reasons based on MLB's rules around that, can't draft in the top 10. So the Cubs could move into a single digit draft pick, for next year, not this coming necessarily, but they didn't finish all that well last year. So who knows how this will all work out. They can get themselves some pretty good picks, but no, I think if you look at it, like, Bellinger makes no sense to stick around on this roster at this point. Like, I feel like you got to move him just for the sake of looking at it and going like, all right, dude, like our top position playing prospects are outfielders. We've got 2 guys, and realistically, like,
so what was it? Let me stop you right there, though. What was the point of signing Bellinger to that deal, right? I mean, we made this big push. We got to get him back, and they want to make the playoffs potentially with him. And there was always that chance that this team was going to suck like they have now. And to load that deal that way, like you said, I mean, those 2 player options, if he sucks like he has been really this year compared to last year, like, there's not a lot of trade value there, right?
No, I mean, I think what they fell into it, I believe, thinking that, okay, he's going to be at least good enough to make just 2 years at that money look like something that he's going to want to opt out of. Like, surely he'll be able to get bigger money on the free market than 2 years at whatever it is, $50 million left after this. And, again, that's fine. But that's the only way that works, is if he plays well enough to opt out of it, because it means he provided you with some really strong offense, and he's gone after a year without you having to move him, right, and eat some money to do it. So I think they were really enamored with what he did, and and again, he's a great dude in the clubhouse. It was a good fit. I think that was kind of one of those things where they looked at it like they bought it. It's when my wife goes to Kohl's and sees something that's on sale that she doesn't really need, but it's like, but it's a really good deal. So I'm going to get it because it just makes sense, because at this point, like, I wouldn't have bought it if it was $100, but now it's on sale for 30 because it's on clearance. And so now it makes sense, and I'm willing to, and I think that's what it was, because his market was like $200 million. They're like, oh, wow, hey, 3 years for 70 million or whatever. Cool. Let's do that. That's way less than we thought we'd have to pay. And it's like, but I think that is where, and now I'm getting way off of what the actual question was, but that is where I think that's the problem that I have with Jed Hoyer's general managership in general, is that I feel like at times I don't believe he deprioritizes winning, but I think he is so transfixed by this idea of getting value in a signing that he's not stopped to really look at, like, what's the downside of this, because the upside is really limited with Dansby Swanson and with Cody Bellinger and guys like that. They have to be performing at least 90th percentile of what you would expect from them. Otherwise, and you look at Swanson's earning as much money as Bryce Harper this year.
It's been so bad this year too.
Yeah, and that's, you can't overcome that. If those are your superstars and all they're ever going to provide is solid value, well, then that's a problem. But no, and that's where I think they need to try to clear that. I do think you'll see them. I mean, heck, another guy who's possible, like Moises Ballesteros, the dude's only 20 years old.
Mo baller.
He's already at AAA. He's rocking. I don't think he sticks behind the plate, but when your catchers are Tomas Nido and Miguel Amaya, why the hell not give this kid a shot? Because at least he's super hitterish. He's going to let a few balls past him, but you've got a good veteran pitching staff. We talked about that. I think they could help guide him along and at least make him passable, even though he's got a DH. I would love to see Matt Shaw coming up. I don't think there's anything else that dude needs to prove. He was a polished college hitter. He spent time in the minors. Let's see what he can. Hey, if you're going to be bad, at least be bad with young, exciting players.
That's what yeah. So that's the lane they should choose, in my opinion. If they're going to be bad, call up some of the young guys. Ship out some people that are hanging around that you overpaid, like a Cody Bellinger, and see what we got. So that leads me to my next question, like Michael Busch. What's your assessment so far on this prospect we got from the Dodgers? He was one of their best prospects in their system. He's been hitting really well of late. Is this a player that we're going to keep around for the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's at this point, and it's not saying much based on where this offense is, but I mean, Michael Busch has been the Cubs' best player this year.
It's crazy.
Yeah, which is And look, an 838 OPS is nothing to sneeze at, and he's there with it. He had 4 hits against the Orioles, had a home run in the first inning. It looks like I think the power could continue to kind of develop. He's we're not talking Pete Alonso or anything like that, but the dude's going to pop 20-25 homers. I think fairly reasonably cheap. No problems there. He slid over and played second base a couple times. Maybe he can DH when you need to. He's a lefty bat, so like. You have to love what you're seeing with some of these things from him. The issue is that, again, this is the dude who's your best hitter.
Yeah.
And he's, for all intent, he's a rookie. But an 838, again, while it's very good, is not like you need guys who are pushing 900, who are pushing 1,000, who can bat in front of and behind Michael. And Ian Happ, again, so I want to give him his roses too, because Happ has been hitting really, really well. He just hit his 5th 3-run homer of the season. That's worked out well. But
do you feel like Happ? Sorry, just to stop you right. Do you feel like Happ irrationally gets most of the hate from Cubs fans?
Yes.
There's kind of like something Cubs fans have this mostly. It's a love hate, but it's mostly a hate of Ian Happ.
I think it's because he's not boisterous. He's very to himself.
But so is Dansby, and I hear nobody talking about how bad Dansby is really compared to Ian Happ when he struggles.
Because Dansby Swanson wasn't one of the kind of remnants of the core, right? Because and Happ came up after the title, but still he was that early first round draft pick. He was the next in the line of when you look at Javi Baez and Chris Bryant and Kyle Schwarber, and then it's Ian Happ.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And the problem is the fans are expecting very good players to be elite players. And Happ is not an elite player. Yes, he's got a couple of gold gloves. He's been in the All-Star game. But he is a dude who should be your 3rd or 4th best hitter. Right? And when Michael Busch is your number 1 and Ian Happ is your number 2, I think those are the only 2 guys above an 800 OPS. That is not a good baseball team. It's just not. Like you have to do better than that. And could Seiya Suzuki be that guy? Could Cody Bellinger be? They both were last year. If you had second half Seiya Suzuki and first half Cody Bellinger playing with now Michael Busch and Ian Happ, very different story, right? Hell, even last year Dansby Swanson, right? Like it's all and I mean, last year, Yan Gomes, right? Like he just fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
Things are bad when the Cubs DFA a dude like that. And still, so there's so many issues though, and that's the problem is that they have assembled a roster of good to very good players with 0 elite players and a low ceiling. That unfortunately we're seeing has a very low floor as well. They thought they thought the floor was high with the defense, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the problem. That is what they leaned heavily into defense up the middle, better contact, things like that. And what they've run into is a team that doesn't have much power and that as a result has very, very little room for margin if they don't slug.
So, yeah. So I guess we got to put our prospect, goggles on and start looking into the future. We're talking about good players, not elite players. Is there an elite player in the organization, in your opinion?
Cade Horton, if he can stay healthy. I mean, I think he's a true ace level pitcher. Again, you can go to the 10 stat, there is no such thing as a pitching prospect and look at, if he stays healthy, right? We're talking about a guy who dropped to where he did with the Cubs were thought to have reached for him because he barely pitched that. I think it was technically only his sophomore season, but his 3rd or even 4th college season by that point with TJ. He's out with some like a lat issue or whatever now. So I think he's up there. The issues, you look at all these guys like, okay, Owen Casey was just, I think Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline just named him as the best power out of all the guys in the futures game. Of course, he's not playing the futures game, kind of little back issue going on, which is why James Triantos made the futures game. But Casey has the most power out of all these guys, which is really saying something when you talk about these minor league guys. Does that play up? That's a great tool. Is the defense going to hold up enough? Where's his position? Matt Shaw, absolute dog. I think the power could be there. This dude who hit a 500-foot home run in college. That could come around. But Again, questions about where he plays. James Triantos, incredible hit tool, tremendous athlete, positionless to an extent, right? So there's so many questions. There's nobody who I look at. This is so different from, they have more depth, but
The
when we
blue
go
chippers
back,
aren't there.
right? When you go back and look at it, you're like, yep, Chris Bryant gonna be
Yeah.
in the majors in a year, gonna be a stud.
No
Javi
question.
Baez, gonna be a stud. Kyle Schwarber came up, gonna
Hit
be
the
a
shit
stud.
out of the ball.
Immediately, these guys came in, but that's the other thing, is because they could call up these, they could bring Kyle Schwarber up earlier than he probably should have otherwise been, because they had so many guys up and down that roster. They're like, yeah, dude, going in here, we'll let you be an emergency catcher, we'll let you DH. Nah, what the hell? Try left field, whatever. We'll figure it out. Because they had so many studs on that team, and now you're like, all right, we got a bunch of guys. Okay, we can try to put you here, but somebody's kind of blocking you, so we got to move. Can you play shortstop? Can you catch? And so yeah, Moises Ballesteros, same thing. The kid is a stud. He's doing things as a hitter at such a young age that we rarely see, not just in the organization, but overall, like ever. 20 years old at AAA. He's like 4 or 5 years younger than most guys there. But he's like 5'7" and 240 or something like that. I mean,
why not just call him up? Like, I feel like other organizations do that all the time, where it's like, oh, he's like absolutely just tearing the cover off the ball.
Yeah.
Oh, so he's young. Just call him up. Whatever. We'll see if he can do it at the major league level. Why not? I feel like we're a little hesitant sometimes, and we got gloves on the way we've been treating our prospects lately.
I think the MLB in general has kind of pushed back on that, though, because a lot of teams brought guys up too early in the last season or two. I mean, Jackson Churio came up and struggled, right? Holiday, you mentioned earlier, struggled mightily, came up, I think he struck out in half of his at-bats even. So I know the Rays are doing that with Caminero. They didn't want to call him up right away. He's really young. And so I think teams are kind of white gloving their prospects a little bit more than they used to your question.
Yeah, but also like, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. But you don't want to rush everybody up and ruin, because, like we've been talking about here, it's, to me, this is a Jed Hoyer problem. He's built a house of cards and it's caving in on him now. And so if you call up all your prospects and everyone finds out they all suck, you have no major leaguers, your prospects all suck, you got nothing. Now you can at least keep them in the minors, in my opinion, let that hype build a little bit, and maybe you can get rid of them, or maybe they even get good enough that they can play at the major league level. I don't know. That's my opinion. But to me, and this is going to be a question for you then, Evan, like I said, Jed Hoyer, to me, is on the hot seat a little bit here with how bad this roster's been. And they've signed Counsell, right? But they didn't sync up Hoyer's deal with Counsell's. And so I think his contract ends at the end of next season, the end of 2025. Do you think that he's on the hot seat here? I mean, what kind of leash does he have? Because it's been, it's 2024. It's been 8 years since they won. It's been a long time since they've been good, in my opinion. What do you think, his leash looks like at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you judge this based on the Twitter response, then his seat is burning hot, and he should be fired, at the All-Star break, which obviously makes no sense, right? Because you're not going to fire a dude. You're not going to fire a guy right ahead of the draft at the trade deadline, right? Like this is not going to happen. So folks who are like clamoring for that, let's stop, because that's not how this is going to work. But I think the real issue comes down to, we can all look at this from the outside and say, man, a lot of this looked preventable, like literally to the point that I mentioned, where he talked specifically about the bullpen. He has talked multiple times about threading the needle, about needing more power, and then not doing anything meaningful to address those needs that they have. But at the end of the day, the man who's deciding on whether or not this guy's going to have a job is the dude who writes his paychecks. And if Tom Ricketts looks at this and says, I feel like you've done a good job of assembling a team that keeps fans coming in, we're making money, things are good, but in my opinion, Jed Hoyer is not a man to be running baseball operations for any team. I mean, unless it is like the Rays or someone like that, who's intentionally kind of working with that value-based budget, who's looking to build a minor league system. I think Hoyer's done a really good job with some of those things. And I thought he was great as Theo Epstein's lieutenant in helping to kind of build that, to maybe be that guy who's playing off of him, who's maybe reining Epstein in a little bit, right? I think Hoyer would be a great GM to work with Dave Dombrowski in Philly. Speaking of which, maybe Sam Fold, who's over there, former Cubs great. He's maybe a guy, but I think for what the Cubs are trying to do from an ownership perspective, I think Hoyer fits that, because he is a guy who's going to go with the budget, who's going to try to, it's quantity over quality, right? He did a great job assembling a bunch of dudes at value.
It's the Reinsdorf method.
Yeah.
Right. It's get the team good enough
money.
Fans will come in.
Yeah. And so the same things that I look at and say, this is why he should not be running baseball operations in Chicago moving forward. Again, in my opinion, I think are the things that makes ownership want him to continue running baseball operations in Chicago. It's so it's that, because look, here's the thing though. If you bring somebody else in, assuming they have the same budget, it would have to be someone who's going to be uber aggressive, who will thread that needle, because they're not going to, like, Ricketts is not going to let them run into a Dodgers budget, right? This is not going to happen, especially with the marquee stuff. But you have to get somebody who's willing to stop hugging the prospects and to either sign or make I really believe you have to walk out on that limb and say, you know what, to hell with it, to safety be damned. We're either trading for a superstar, or we're going to go sign somebody for a crap ton of money and figure out how to clear stuff otherwise. But we're getting that franchise player to stick in the middle of it, hell or high water, and we'll figure out how to work around it.
Yeah.
Versus what they've done is kind of just sign a bunch of dudes, hope people come up and become that franchise player, and hope is a pretty crappy strategy.
Yeah, for sure. I got one more question for you. It's a non-Cubs question, really, but it's an MLB one in any case. I saw you commented on something our guy Lance Brozdowski posted about this new thing, Traject, that is now being allowed to use in games, right? So for anybody that doesn't know what Traject is, it is a machine and that you put in like the hitting cage, right? That projects an image on the device's screen, replicates pitcher release point and gyro spin. I'm just curious, what your opinion is of this thing, and if you've seen it more than just the little short videos that we've seen online, and how much do you think this is going to make hitting better and help solve MLB's hitting problem? Because this year MLB batting average is 242. It hasn't been that low since 1968 when it was 237. So I mean, pitchers have an upper hand by far at this point, and the last 3-4 years it's been under 250. I think going back to 2019, hitters are getting less and less of an edge here. Is this something that's going to impact the game a lot?
I certainly hope so. I mean, it's really interesting to me because I mean, you've got this, which is a vastly improved iteration of iPitch, which is in itself really cool, because with iPitch you can sit there and have an app and sit there and actually work like a pitcher and throw sliders, fastballs, change up what you're doing in real time against a hitter. Because I mean, just working, and granted the youth level is nowhere near what Major League Baseball is, but I know working with my son and guys on his team, he's 15, there's only so much you can do with a pitching machine, in a normal cage, right? Like, oh, it's a fastball, but if I want to adjust it to a curveball or slider, I got to change these knobs and do all this stuff. And I can't do that pitch to pitch. I can't replicate game situations. And, so, okay, we're going fastball. Well, guess what? Exactly where this pitch is going to be. All you got to do is get the timing, put the barrel in the right place, and you're good. What I love about this is like you said, if we're going to face Paul Skeens tomorrow, or if we're facing him now and I'm on the bench and I know I might have to come in and pinch hit, I can go get in 5-6 at-bats against Paul Skeens right there in the back. I can face this dude. And so when I go in there, I'm not sitting there like, oh, I don't have a book on this guy. I don't know what to do. And I can get in those tendencies and kind of find out. And if they can program that, which I'm sure there's some kind of AI algorithm that they can put in there and know what this dude is going to throw in what situations. I mean, yeah, I think that's the next evolution of where hitting needs to go about taking. I'm all for taking advantages away from pitch. I love watching Pitching Ninja, but I'm so sick of the meatball idiots talking about how, oh, well, George Brett and Wade Buck. Like, look, man, I looked it up because George Brett was talking. I would have looked up the stats. The average fastball when George Brett played was like 90.
Yeah.
Right. And the dude never faced, like, I would be willing to bet, unless it was due to injury or just a crazy outcome, dude wasn't facing 4 different pitchers in a game, 3 different pitchers in a game with the kind of stuff they have now. Tony Gwynn was a legend. I'm taking nothing away from him, but dude is not hitting as well as he did in today's game. Pure and simple. Maybe he's the best hitter in today's game.
Game's changed.
But he's not hitting 383. So yeah, I think this is a way to give something back to those hitters, and I love it. And there's no way in hell I would ever step in against it, because it would be the most embarrassingly bad thing in the world. But it sounds fun.
Yeah, I say we do that, allow that to happen, and then juice the balls again. Let's see some big dingers. All right,
do it.
Last question here, Evan. Let's look in the crystal ball here. Let's go into the October baseball. What are the Cubs looking like here as we go into the fall? Who's on the roster? How's the team playing? What's the status of the Cubs here in the fall?
I mean, I think honestly, I think it'll be, I don't know if more fun will be, but like there'll be less anxiety around it. I think it'll be something that's going to be, I do believe that for as much as we're talking about picking a lane, and I've said stay in the middle, I think they end up moving a couple of, like I said, I've harped on this too often, but Bellinger and maybe a couple of other guys, Morel maybe gets parted with. I mean, I could see Horner going, but I don't think they do anything wholesale, right? I think they move a couple of those dudes. I do think they look to give Owen Casey a cup of coffee for sure. I think we see Shaw coming up. That makes the most sense. I could see Ballesteros if they clear enough 40-man spots. It would be awesome to see Horton coming up if he's, again, provided he's healthy, probably in a bullpen role, more of a reward kind of getting in there. But yeah, and then pitchers, man, if anybody watched Hunter Biggie, and if you didn't, go back and check this out, because that dude made his MLB debut against the Orioles. The game was 7-2, so it was out of hand, but touched 100 a couple times. Nasty slider, great curveball, kind of out of nowhere. 12th round pick a few years back out of Harvard, but it's probably I had an irrational amount of fun watching it for a team that at the time was 7 games under 500, and the game was out of hand. But to watch a homegrown, drafted and developed Cubs reliever come up pumping 100, getting strikeouts, throwing nasty stuff, like that in and of itself was super cool, and something that we haven't seen much of, if any of. And so I think just things like that, right? Even if they suck, they could be 10 games under 500. Give me something fun to watch. Give me something that makes me feel good about the future, because I haven't seen that yet. So let's get that. Let's get Justin Steele to keep pumping. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I just want to see a couple dudes come up and give us all some hope that, like, yeah, man, even if the direction isn't perfect, like, I can get behind this guy for the next few years, even if he's only good for a month. There's been a few of those, but I think we're gonna have fun in September with some of these young guys.
Okay. All right, man. I'd love to hear it. Looking forward to September then. Evan, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure. Again, he's Evan Altman. He's the editor-in-chief and co-founder at Cubs Insider. You can find him on Twitter at @DEvanAltman. Thanks, Evan.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to our guest today. That was Evan Altman. He is the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Cubs Insider. A lot of great in-depth knowledge there, kind of on the organization, prospects that could be coming up, trades that could be happening. I know as Cubs fans, right, it's kind of bleak right now, but I think what we need is that little sliver of optimism. And, if it comes in, September and we got these prospects up and they're playing well, although we're not winning games, I think we'll feel a little better about the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we looked at everything, right? We talked about all the prospects. We talked about the current roster. We talked about potential trade pieces, right? Are they going to be buyers? Are they going to be sellers? We talked about the manager. What kind of impact has he had so far? And then we talked about Jed Hoyer. I mean, right. And the hot seat that he might be on. And I think his name is the one to me that's, you know, the loudest right now is what are we going to do with Jed Hoyer at the end of next season when his contract's up, right? So if these prospects come up and they're all kind of like Pete Crow Armstrong, I mean, there's
the door, Jed.
Conversation to be had for sure, at least about getting rid of Jed. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
It's not good, but you know, come that time, Bears season will be full swing, so it won't really matter because all eyes will be on that as soon as training camp starts. The way these teams have been playing, but thanks again. That's our show today. Thanks again for joining us. For Evan Bierman, I'm Dan Slowick. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers.